Sometimes when we are watching what's happening in this world, what's happening with other people, and we may feel a little bit despondent. Even if we have different intentions, there may be war in the world, there may be a conflict, there may be so many bad things happening, and then we can easily get discouraged. So the important thing is to remember whatever others may be doing, and even if we can't stop them from doing bad things, what we have, the option we do have, we for ourselves, we can be peaceful. As the Buddha said, others may be killing, but we ourselves, if we are completely determined, we will not kill any living beings. Others may be violent, going to war, attacking. Then we obviously try our best to stop that. If we have any influence, if we can exert any influence on anyone, to be peaceful and not to hurt or harm or attack, we suddenly do that. We will express that in our speech. But there's a limit how much you can achieve, and even however much you may be saying and explaining, somewhere may be still war, attacks. But the option we have for ourselves, we can be committed to non-violence, to peace. Whatever others are doing, we don't focus so much on that. The most important thing is what we are doing ourselves, because in the end, all beings carry their own karma. Whatever actions we are doing ourselves, that is karma we will be receiving. Whatever action others are doing, that is a karma they will be receiving. Funny enough, sadly enough, usually our response is that we go with the same kind of energy. And if someone is talking to us aggressively or angrily, what is a normal response? Usually we also get angry. If someone is insulting us, we may feel like insulting back. But in this way, there's never an end to it. No one cannot abandon violence through violence. One cannot stop killing by killing. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to mindfully notice that and do the opposite. The Buddha said we can be a doctor, a physician curing others. Because ultimately, anger is like an affliction, it's like a sickness, kind of a mental sickness. If someone has got a flu, or a cold, or coronavirus, are you usually angry at them? When you hear someone has got the coronavirus, do you feel this hatred and anger and you start insulting them for being sick? Would be a very weird reaction. What do you usually feel? Sympathy, compassion even. However, if someone has got a mental flu, mental coronavirus of anger, and they're really angry, grumpy, how do you respond to that? Do you also feel compassion? Or do you also get angry? Make a good effort to. No, but you notice it's funny when someone is physically sick, and some people may be angry most of the time. They have that as a natural condition. This would be similar to someone with a disability. Usually, if someone has got a disability, then the wheelchair, are you angry at them? It's not just the flu which goes away, but it's a long-term condition. And we feel even more compassion, isn't it? If someone doesn't have just an infection which goes away after a week or a few weeks, but they have to sit in the wheelchair all their life, we feel even more compassion. So ideally, and if someone is grumpy and angry most of the time, it would be similar to a person who has got a severe disability. Only mentally, we should even have more compassion, not less. Imagine you're a doctor and your patient comes and you try to treat them, and then you catch the flu yourself and your patient is getting worse. Is that a successful doctor? Patient comes, doctor gets infected, and patient gets worse. Is this how it should be? What should it be like, doctor? Patient should improve, and the doctor shouldn't catch the disease, no? So now imagine you meet a very angry, grumpy person, someone who is aggressive, even violent. And now you also become aggressive and violent. So someone is shouting at you and you're shouting back, even louder. Will that person calm down and become really quiet and gentle from that? Or will they get even more angry? They get even more angry. No? And the fact that you shout back and you're angry yourself now is just like the doctor getting infected. And so the Buddha recommended that we are physicians and for both. So if someone comes up and they are angry at us, and we can overcome our anger, and we can mindfully notice how irritation arises, and we can abandon the irritation, and we mindfully establish a very wholesome state instead, like metta, loving kindness, like karuna, compassion. It's like the doctor having had that flu already, and now they have natural immunity. They don't catch it. There's someone who has got that ability to abandon the anger arising and to set up the loving kindness. This is the best immunity against anger, loving kindness, unconditional goodwill to all beings. And then you don't catch the cold, you don't catch the flu from the patient. And what is a normal response if someone is very angry, aggressive, and you talk to them calmly, quietly, and your heart is radiating unconditional goodwill? Now, they may not be immediately cured, just like going to the doctor. And it's not like you go there and the moment you leave the surgery, you're already fine again. That sometimes may take some time. But by and large, even an angry person, when they're exposed to loving kindness, then it will have a wholesome effect. They may not completely let go of all anger, and may at least become a little bit less. The funny thing is often we are disposing of our loving kindness in the opposite way. And just imagine you're a doctor, you're the physician, and then you walk around, and to every healthy person you are meeting, you give them high dose of antibiotics against pneumonia. Would that be a smart thing to do, doctor? To give the antibiotics against pneumonia to the healthy people? But I admit it's a rhetorical question. That would be a bad doctor who is giving the medication to the healthy people. Who should the medication be given to? To the sick ones, the ones who have pneumonia. They should get their antibiotics. And the ones who have got diabetes, they should get their insulin and so on. But now look, how are you dispensing your loving kindness? Is it possible that you feel strong loving kindness, usually to the people who are very kind and gentle and friendly? Because it's easy, no? If someone is treating you politely, and they are friendly, and they really like you, and they praise you, and they flatter you, then you're quite happy to have loving kindness to them. You wish them well. This is like giving the medicine preferably to the healthy ones, the ones who have loving kindness already. They don't really need your loving kindness. I mean, it's still good to give it to them. So I notice my simile has some limitation. You never would want to give a treatment to healthy people, but loving kindness, of course, you also give to those who already have loving kindness. But the simile is still expressing the point I'm trying to make, that we often withhold our loving kindness, our compassion, exactly from the people who need it most. The more angry they are, the bigger we should make an effort to give them lots and lots of loving kindness. The more violent, aggressive people are, the more important it is that we are responding and ourselves practicing with non-violence and calmness and peace. So we should never feel despondent whatever happens in the world. And even if everyone else is acting like demons, we always have that one freedom. We have that one power that we can unambiguously, with complete determination, at least I myself, I will not practice killing, hurting, harming. Whatever else others may be doing, even if they're all acting like demons, I myself can practice loving kindness and compassion. But that option is always there. And then we focus on that. Rather than focusing what others are doing and getting upset and worked up about it, we are rather focusing on what we can do ourselves. And usually it's a lot. And usually you'll find that they are not all demons, that there are actually quite a few other people who feel similar. Then we will attract those. And once we are angry, there's a certain attraction towards angry people. Once we develop loving kindness, we will attract people who also appreciate and try to practice loving kindness. And so we gradually build up that energy. We may not be able to start really big style, making the whole world peaceful. But even the Buddha couldn't do that. There was war even in the Buddha's time. The very countries where he lived in, the kingdoms, they still had war. The people killed their own parents, the kings in the kingdoms where the Buddha lived, these atrocities they still happen. So what are our chances that we could stop that? Or we can stop ourselves. That is the basis. And we can start ourselves in practicing goodness, in practicing generosity, and helping others, and making punya, and sharing and giving. And once we do that, you automatically start attracting and meeting up and finding like-minded people. Once you have got a few like-minded people who enjoy doing something good and wholesome, giving, charity, sharing, helping, making good karma, generating punya, and then you get all these beautiful synergies. There's a great synergy, once you have a dozen people doing something good, this energy becomes very strong and they're all reinforcing each other. We all know how much that affects others. Now imagine you're hanging out in a group and one person is really depressed and they're sitting there, they're miserable, and then they start crying and the tears are rolling down. Most likely the whole group will feel a bit down. On the other hand, if you're hanging out together and you know a good joke, really funny, you share that. Everyone starts laughing, and everyone will find it even more funny. The more people laugh about the same joke, the funnier it is. The more people are happy together and doing good things, the more people are practicing loving kindness together. They will reinforce it. And we had 2 years intensive training trying not to get infected with the coronavirus, isn't it? People are doing everything, doing their hand disinfection and keeping distance and wearing masks and so many attempts and efforts. But often we are neglecting how do we protect our mind from getting infected from mental virus. What is a mental virus? What we call defilement. Anger, hatred, delusion. And if you think the Omicron variant of coronavirus is highly infectious, maybe so, but the mental virus of the defilements is much more contagious than even smallpox or measles. Because can you catch measles from someone who is 10,000 kilometers away? I can ask the doctor again, but he probably will tell me that he doesn't have to answer me that question. It's another rhetorical question. It's just, I know it's a rhetorical question. So you can't catch measles from someone who's 10,000 kilometers away. But if you send out a really angry tweet on Twitter, 10,000 people, each one of them 10,000 kilometers away, may catch anger from that and aggression. This is how contagious the mind states are. In particular, with the modern means of communication, the social media, internet. With the coronavirus, everything went online because the virus hasn't developed the ability yet. He can't go into your smartphone through the internet, through the mobile tower and come out of the other guy's smartphone and jump at them. So everything went much more online Because when you're on Zoom, you can't catch the virus from the other guys on Zoom. Doesn't quite work with mental defilements. Mental defilements can be transmitted via Zoom, via Instagram, via YouTube, via Facebook, via Snapchat, via WhatsApp, via Skype, and so on. Everything works perfectly well. You can transmit it. There's even worse. And sometimes they call people super spreader, or this new vocabulary we learned in the last 2 years. Can we ask the doctor again what is a super spreader? I think it was applied to people because different individuals producing different amounts of virus. And some people, depending on their own genetic or whatever makeup, or how seriously they're infected, they may be producing much more virus. And they are able to infect a large number of people. And sometimes one person may have infected several hundred others with a virus. But if you really go viral with your TikTok video or with your tweet, how many people view a viral TikTok? Millions, isn't it? So this is a true super spreader. If we have anger or delusion, we have to be careful, and the delusion is the most serious of all defilements. People are often not quite aware of that. Most people can understand that anger and hatred is a defilement. We try and not to act on that, not to allow our mind to be overwhelmed by anger and hatred. And most people agree on that. Although in war, suddenly it's all good and it's encouraged. Of course, it's not all good according to the Buddha. It's never good. In any situation, the Buddha never, ever endorsed or encouraged anger and hatred. So be careful if suddenly someone tries to tell you, no, anger is suddenly good. No, not according to the Buddha's teaching. More tricky is the sensual desire, passion, greed. Often people find it more difficult to see what's the problem with that. But the worst of all is actually delusion. Difficult to abandon and very serious karmic results. There's one reason why we keep the fourth precept. Do you all know the fourth precept? Which is Musavada Vedamani Sikapadang Samadhyami, which means in English, I undertake the training precept to abstain from lying, from speaking, communicating falsehood. Now this is intentional lying, but of course, even if it's unintentional, it's still not helpful. So we have to be very careful that when we communicate and what we put out, whether we are putting out the very dangerous virus of delusion and ignorance. And if we put out anything that is fake or misleading, false, there's a huge negative impact on anyone who gets it and believes it. This is why the Buddha never encourages even what is sometimes called white lies. Because the Buddha doesn't encourage lying under any possible situation. It is never wholesome, because it increases delusion in someone else. And delusion is one of the most serious problems, or the most serious problem we can have in our mind. So it's very important that we don't put out anything that increases delusion, and we don't put out anything that is fake, so we have to make sure. Retweeting and sharing some Facebook entry, people, it's so easy nowadays. Something comes in and then you get excited and you share it with everyone. Photo, have you ever heard of a program called Photoshop? So since Photoshop, how reliable is the photos you see? And by now they have deepfake even for videos. So one has to be very careful. And we may be thinking, oh, if I just get this image and I share it, but maybe the image is fake. Maybe the image was deliberately designed to be harmful, to increase people's delusion, to make you hate someone, or some group, or some country, or some race, or some organization, or whatever. Quite deliberately in a misleading image, a misleading video, a false information, a propaganda. What do you think in war? Is it usually the case? This is a non-medical question. I can ask someone else this time. Is it usually like this in war, that one side, so one country, is doing all this awful propaganda and it's all wrong, and the other country is not doing any propaganda and what they say is all true? Is that usually how it goes in war? No? What is the usual situation? What's the normal situation? They do both propaganda, isn't it? This is at least what I would think. So meaning there will be lots of propaganda. It will not be easy to find out what is really true. So we also have to develop some good, robust, natural immunity against false information and propaganda. And just like we talked about, when people get angry, we easily get infected, get angry ourselves. Same with violence. The same with passion and desire. Anyone who has got strong desire and passion, and they invite you here, this food is really yummy, and try this sweet and this dessert. And then we're all eating the unhealthy sweets and so on, because the desire is contagious. But so is the delusion, so is false information. So we have to do both, just like the good doctor who is curing the patient and not getting infected themselves. So everything we put out should be truthful, because what is a cure against delusion and fake? The true, factual reality. Yatha bhuta jnana dasana, the seeing things as they truly are. And the other thing is not getting infected. Being aware that the virus is around of wrong information, false information, and misleading information, incomplete information, propaganda, psyops. And if you have to isolate us from that. And when people are willing to be locked down, how long were they locked down in Melbourne? 250 days or something? Something crazy, no? There are such big efforts not to get the virus, the coronavirus. So let's make an effort ourselves that we can isolate us from mental virus, from anger, from aggression, from desire, greed, and particularly also from delusion, from knowing wrongly. because they usually go together. And most people will not be willing to feel strong hatred unless there's some supposedly no reason for that. And so often hatred is deliberately cultivated by giving people wrong or misleading information. It's one of the forms of wrong speech. The pisuna vacha, the speech is deliberately designed so that people get angry against others, that there's division, that there's conflict between others. And if you look on the internet and social media, I think you find a lot of that, isn't it? And how much speech is there, how much communication, which is the opposite for fostering and engendering the harmony. People can live in harmony. So we have to have mindfulness to protect us from that virus. We need to have loving kindness, equanimity, compassion. We need to have an unwavering commitment. To the 5 precepts. Whatever happens, we keep the 5 precepts. However much others are lying and misleading and manipulating, we stay truthful and genuine, authentic. The truth, satcha, is also satcha pavami, as considered one of the spiritual perfections. Now that is what is isolating us against the wrong information delusion. So we need that unconditional commitment to truth. Unfortunately, truth is one of the first victims often in war. Wars are not known to be environments where it's easy to find truth. So we want to develop such a pavami, satcha detana, resolution, determination for truth. And this carries very deep to a profound internal Dhamma, because we are also lying internally to ourselves, convincing ourselves that conditioned phenomena, sankharas, are permanent, are me, mine, and self. This is the lies, the deep ones we are constantly telling ourselves. Deep down inside, on a subconscious level, the profound defilements deep in the unconscious mind. A little internal propaganda and psyops, a psyop convincing ourselves that this body is mine, this body is myself. This is just a psyop. That you own your car, your money, that is yours, is just a psyop. And ultimately we have to overcome that through that quality of yatha bhuta jnana dasana, seeing things as they truly are, as not self, not me, not mine, as not providing true satisfaction and happiness, as being impermanent, as not lasting. All sankharas, all conditioned phenomena. Because then we can let go of them and experience what is unconditioned, release, liberation, nibbana. But if even the stuff we are putting out on Twitter and TikTok is false and misleading, and we can't even recognize what is a psyop and propaganda and false and misleading in the things we are receiving, how are our chances that we can go on into these deep defilements and recognize that I, me and mine is the biggest psyop in the history of the universe for Mara, as a psyop which has kept us in samsara successfully for endless time. So he finally has to see through that. Not me, not mine, not self. Okay, that is a few reflections I like to offer. Ignorance in Pali avijja and delusion, Pali moha, they're very close. And the translation, you could also use different translations there. But the most common one is avijja with ignorance translated and moha with delusion. The ignorance, I feel the problem with that term is people often think ignorance is not knowing, but in reality it's more like knowing wrongly and not knowing that you know wrongly. The simile I like to give is like with a phone number. I think I know your phone number, but I wouldn't know this gentleman's phone number. Don't know your phone number, but I know that I don't know it. So it's not such a big problem. If I wanted to call you, I would ask you for your phone number, or I would find someone who maybe knows your phone number, and then I can easily overcome that lack of knowledge. But for example, I think I know Rukmani's phone number, but imagine I've got the wrong phone number, and I don't know that. And now I try to call you, and I ring that phone number, and maybe just no answer, just nothing. But I don't know the wrong number, and I come to wrong conclusions. And I think, oh, she doesn't like me anymore. Why does she not answer? What have I done wrong? I call, try again, call, no answer. Then I get upset. This is really not nice that she doesn't answer my phone calls. And because I know wrongly, knowing wrongly and not knowing that you know wrongly, this is really what it's about. But both are very, very closely related. Avijja is usually used in a context of dependent origination as a cause of sankharas, and sankharas the cause of consciousness and so on. Whereas when you have the three roots of the unwholesome, the defilements, then usually moha is used. Raga, dosa, moha. In different contexts, but in terms of meaning they're quite close. And if avijja is gone, then also moha is gone, and vice versa. Yes.
Not really a question, but regarding the point on expressing loving kindness to someone who is hatred, like giving the medicine to who is actually in need. Something I try to practice is something I gathered from one of the Dhammatalks is it's sometimes I feel it's helpful to get rid of the entity view, saying that the person X is in disagreement with me, or the person X is blaming me, or something like that. Instead of that, if I look at, okay, this is his or her
As someone is sharing very correctly, the relationship between Sakkaya Ditthi, the personality view, entity view, generally in a conceit, the delusion of I am. The Sakkaya Ditthi is a form of delusion. We can call it Sakkaya Ditthi in the entity view. It was basically in the form of the ignorance of avidya and of delusion, knowing wrongly. I would fall under that. And I totally agree that this is closely related to anger. And as you suggested, if you don't see it so much in terms of an entity that you are angry at person X because they are bad, instead you contemplate that this person is simply a conditioned process, or you perceive as an entity as a conditioned process, and they're acting, for example, because they may have been under propaganda themselves. That person has been brought up in a certain propaganda system and a certain influence from parents, media, and then now they're acting in that particular way. So then you're no longer angry at this delusionary entity. Instead, you just see that what happens, what they are doing, is simply a result of certain conditions, a conditioned process. It's much more difficult to be very angry at a conditioned process. Instead, you will probably rather look at the condition and try to change them, if you can. But it also works in the other direction, which you didn't mention, because as long as we ourselves have entity view, then our anger is much stronger. This is why someone who has abandoned that and who has even abandoned the delusion of I am cannot have any anger. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. On the other hand, so I totally agree with what you said. If you contemplate others not so much from the normal delusion of entity view, of an existing entity, but more as a conditioned process, then it's much easier to abandon anger. But also the other direction, contemplating your own delusion of entity. The weaker that becomes, the less we will be provoked. Up to the level when someone has abandoned completely all delusions and ignorance of I, self, me, mine, and entity view, that they cannot possibly be provoked by anything. Yeah, but thanks so much for pointing that out. That's exactly right. They go together. And people with a very strong delusion, and a meaning that they have a very strong ego, very strong sense of ego, very strong delusion of I, me, big-headed, conceited, proud, haughty, arrogant, they tend to get angry much easier, and it's quite obvious. And the more we reduce the sense of ego, haughtiness, arrogance, and so on, the less we will be feeling provoked. It's quite natural. In a big-headed, we say in a metaphorical sense, but imagine that literally. If you got a very big head, you will bump against anything. And if you put two people with a gigantic head into one room, they'll constantly bump against each other. As if you're the opposite, small-headed, which term doesn't really exist, but then you will not bump into other big egos. Yeah, thanks so much for pointing that out. Very valuable observation. Now, this is how we bring in wisdom for abandoning anger. Now, if you practice metta as more the samadhi approach to abandon anger, substituting it with loving kindness, if you want to practice more on the side of wisdom, insight, you analyze how the defilements arise based on the delusion of entity. Okay, yeah. Ben.
There is a recent event that I think really illustrates how we can be very selective in our compassion and loving kindness. It's a video that came out a few weeks ago from Ukraine. It's 5
fighting for east from the east.
Yeah.
Fighting on the Russian side. All of a sudden, all the loving kindness is gone. The family
Turned into anger.
so
Yeah,
now people feel, oh, this is a man fighting for Russia. He's a bad guy. But the situation is exactly the same. The family is still crying. He's still separating from his family, protecting him from the war.
Yeah.
Because people figure out, oh, he's from the other side. He's the enemy. So it doesn't matter. We don't have loving kindness anymore. Because we think he's the opposite side.
Yeah, that's actually a fascinating example. Yeah, I agree. Someone is just sharing, and just report what's being told to me here for podcast. Apparently there was a video coming out some time ago from Ukraine, and it was really heartbreaking of a Ukrainian man putting his whole family into the train and being separated from them because the men, I think, have to continue fighting. And when the video came out, and then the whole family crying and being separated from this Ukrainian man, from the father, and everyone felt so much compassion. And then sometime later, it actually turned out that although he was Ukrainian, he was actually fighting on the side of the Russians. And once that became known, then everyone turned the compassion about. Now they were very angry at the guy. And it's exactly the same guy, it's exactly the same family, it's exactly the same video, and exactly the same thing, first triggering a response of compassion, and then later triggering a response of anger and resentment. So this shows that the mind games our mind can play with us. And that shows that it's not out there that we get angry. Because what was out there is the same situation. There must be something which we are putting into it. But if we are putting it into it, that also means we can stop it. If it wasn't a mechanistic process, something happens and I just get angry without any chance of stopping it, then what could we do? But this example shows that actually it depends on things happening in our own mind. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, quite fascinating. And I can imagine how it flipped over, exactly the same guy. First compassion and then suddenly anger, yeah. Thanks for that, yeah.
I was just thinking, what's really sad for me in this instance is that the suffering of the family is the same. And on the second instance it becomes justified, which is really very sad to see. The suffering is the same.
For sure, yeah. Exactly, yeah. Okay, thank you for all these really good contributions. Next session, 3 p.m.